After the lecture, Moon Young steps outside to smoke. Julie's ex-husband, an alcoholic who used to abuse her, arrives, begging for forgiveness and promising not to hurt her again. Julie refuses, saying she's in love with someone else now. Enraged, her ex-husband begins to assault her. Seeing this, Moon Young throws a can at him and confronts him, demanding to know what men like him gain from hurting their wives. Furious, the man slaps Moon Young hard, causing her to fall. Just then, Gang Tae rushes in and attacks the man, beating him up. Julie asks Gang Tae to stop, and he does, but by then, the hospital staff has witnessed the whole scene. Moon Young is impressed by Gang Tae's bravery. He gently touches her face and asks if she's okay. Head nurse Park Hang-ja reports Gang Tae's actions to director Oh Ji-won, accusing him of hitting a patient's relative. While director Oh doesn't want to fire Gang Tae, he's forced to do so due to the situation. Instead of being upset, Gang Tae feels a sense of relief, as if he's been freed. He rushes to Moon Young and excitedly tells her that he has quit his job and is now free. He reminds her of her promise, that once he quit his job, they would go on a trip together. Moon Young, feeling a mix of joy and sadness, agrees to go on the trip with him. Moon Young and Gang Tae are on their way for the trip. When Moon Young asks how long they'll be enjoying the trip, Gang Tae replies that it's just for one day, and they'll return tonight. This frustrates Moon Young, as she wanted to spend the night with him, but Gang Tae isn't ready for that yet. In her frustration, Moon Young speeds up the car to scare him. But when Gang Tae still doesn't give in, she stops the car, kicks him out, and drives away. Later that night, Gang Tae reconsiders and agrees to spend the night with Moon Young. Reflecting on the earlier events, he admits that he didn't know what got into him. He confesses to Moon Young that he struggles to control his emotions when he's around her. Just as they're about to share a kiss, they get interrupted by the sound of a deer, ruining the moment. Angry, Moon Young curses the deer for spoiling their special moment. The next day, Moon Young goes all out with her fashion for the trip, dressing up in an extravagant outfit. Gang Tae jokes that there's no need to dress up so much, but she insists that dressing up is what makes trips fun. She checks Gang Tae's backpack and throws out all the food, commenting that it seems like he's going on his first trip. They arrive at the mountains, and Gang Tae encourages Moon Young to cross a bridge. However, Moon Young is scared of heights and hesitates. Gang Tae suggests that she sing while crossing, so she starts singing, but her voice is so off-key that Gang Tae tells her to stop. Despite the mishaps, they enjoy their time together, taking selfies and sharing laughs. While enjoying their day, they spot Julie and her boyfriend, Choi Daniel. Julie, after the altercation with her ex-husband, has been called to America by her family for her safety. She is leaving the next day and wants to spend her last moments with Choi Daniel, who has run away from the psychiatric hospital to be with her. He pleads with Gang Tae not to report them and asks for his help, as it's partly because of Gang Tae that Julie is in this situation. Gang Tae promises to keep quiet. Secretly, Moon Young sneaks off and buys tickets for the night stay, not just for Julie and Choi Daniel, but also for herself and Gang Tae. When Gang Tae finds out, he's upset that she didn't book separate rooms for them. Moon Young teases him, saying that she just wants to enjoy the night. Later that night, Gang Tae asks Moon Young about her past, and if she ever had a best friend. Moon Young reveals that Ju-ri was her only friend when they were kids. Ju-ri stayed by her side so that no one would bully her, as all the other kids were scared of Moon Young. However, as time passed, Ju-ri started making other friends who also began to distance themselves from Moon Young because of her behavior. This led to Ju-ri breaking off their friendship. Moon Young says that she doesn't need friends now because she has Gang Tae. As they talk, Gang Tae drinks something he believes to be juice, but it turns out to be alcohol, and he gets drunk. Even in his drunken state, he tries hard to keep himself in check, not wanting to do anything inappropriate. Moon Young flirts with him playfully, but Gang Tae keeps pushing her away. They end up fighting throughout the night. The next morning, Gang Tae brings flowers for Moon Young and asks her not to trample on them this time. Moon Young happily accepts the flowers, and this time, Gang Tae kisses her. Julie and Daniel finally face their separation. As Julie prepares to leave for America, Julie asks Daniel to come with her, but Daniel becomes emotional, explaining that his mental health isn't stable enough for him to join her yet. He promises that once he completes his treatment at the psychiatric hospital, he will come to her as a responsible man to take care of her. The two share an emotional farewell, embracing each other before parting ways. Afterward, Gang Tae and Moon Young drop Daniel back at the psychiatric hospital. Daniel casually tells his friend Kang Pil-ong about the enjoyable day he had. He also accidentally lets slip that Gang Tae and Moon Young are in a relationship. Oh Cha-young, one of Gang Tae's colleagues, overhears this and begins spreading the news to everyone. Sung-tae also hears about it and becomes upset, feeling betrayed that Gang Tae didn't tell him the truth about the previous night. Sung Tae confronts Gang Tae angrily, accusing him of lying. As emotions flare, Sang Tae brings up the painful memory from their childhood, recalling when Gang Tae, in a moment of frustration, wished that Sang Tae would die. Gang Tae tries to explain that he didn't mean it, but Sang Tae is overwhelmed with anger and pain. Convinced that Gang Tae still harbors ill feelings toward him, he starts shouting that Gang Tae wants him dead. This emotional outburst leaves Gang Tae heartbroken, and he breaks down in tears, insisting that he never meant any harm. The hospital staff has to sedate Sung Tae to calm him down, and they place him in a separate room to rest. Meanwhile, Gang Tae sits outside, anxiously waiting for Sung Tae to wake up. Director Oh Ji-won calls Gang Tae and tells him that he can return to his job, as it's crucial for him to stay by Sung Tae's side and care for him. Despite waiting all day, Sung Tae doesn't go outside, and Gang Tae, now deeply depressed, leaves the hospital. Moon Young tries to stop him, but Gang Tae, overwhelmed by guilt, blames her for everything that has happened and asks her to leave him alone. He tells her that he's not worthy of her, and spirals further into his depression. Later, Gang Tae confides in Jae-soo, telling him how much he enjoyed his time with Moon Young but admits that he can't stay with her because he needs to take care of Sung Tae. He feels torn between his duty to his brother and his desire to be with Moon Young. Meanwhile, in the hospital, head nurse Park Hang-ja gives Sung Tae the one and only copy of the book titled The Death of the Witch of the West, written by Moon Young's mother, and he curiously reads it. The next day, Moon Young visits Gang Tae and apologizes, pleading with him to come with her. She tries hard to convince him, but Gang Tae refuses, telling her that his purpose in life is to take care of Sung Tae, and because of that, he can't be with her. As he walks away, Moon Young cries out, asking him when he will finally start living his life for himself instead of for others. That night, Moon Young feels a deep sense of loneliness. She sends Gang Tae multiple messages, trying to find an excuse to get him to come to her, but he doesn't respond. In the midst of her loneliness, Juri arrives, sent by Gang Tae to pick up some of his essential belongings. Moon Young invites Juri to stay and have a drink, and Juri ends up drinking more than expected. As Juri gets drunk, she loses control and slaps Moon Young, calling her a bitch and accusing her of stealing the love of her life. She declares that she'll never forgive her for taking Gang Tae away from her before passing out. Sang-yin then comes to pick up Juri and takes her home. On the other hand, Gang Tae, filled with guilt and regret, breaks down in tears, repeatedly apologizing to Sang Tae for lying to him and promising never to lie again. Seeing his brother so emotional, Sang Tae feels pity for him and ultimately forgives him. The next day at the hospital, a patient named Park Ok-ran whispers in Dae-hwan's ear, claiming to be his wife, the one he had tried to kill. Shocked, Dae-hwan lashes out, calling her a monster and attempting to attack her. Gang Tae intervenes just in time to stop him. Every night, Park Ok-ran sings a lullaby in the male lobby, which causes Dae-hwan to have violent episodes. Director Oh Ji-won notices this suspicious behavior on the CCTV and calls Park Ok-ran in for questioning. However, she denies any involvement. Meanwhile, it's Moon Young's birthday. She waits outside Gang Tae's house, hoping to see him. Soon-dok notices her sitting alone and invites her to dinner. Moon Young enjoys the soup Soon-dok has made and, after the meal, heads back to her house. At the hospital, Gang Tae learns that Park Ok-ran has escaped, and fearing that she might go to Moon Young's house, he rushes there in a state of panic. On the other side, Park Ok-ran has indeed arrived at Moon Young's house. She wishes her a happy birthday and claims to be her real mother. Moon Young doesn't believe her, but Park Ok-ran leaves a letter on the table and picks up a sharp pen. Sensing danger, Moon Young tries to stop her, but in the process, Park Ok-ran injures Moon Young's hand, causing it to bleed. Just then, Gang Tae arrives at the house, and upon seeing Moon Young's injured hand, he immediately embraces her, worried about her safety. When he asks where Park Ok-ran is, she tells him that she left just a while ago. Feeling hurt, she suspects that Gang Tae came only to catch Park Ok-ran and not because he was truly concerned about her. Angry, she retreats to her room. However, Gang Tae follows her and reassures her that he ran all the way there solely for her. He wishes her a happy birthday and kisses her, making Moon Young happy. Later, Gang Tae, exhausted from the stress, develops a high fever. Moon Young stays by his side all night, taking care of him. The next morning, Gang Tae's condition improves. He opens up to Moon Young, telling her about Sang Tae's traumatic past and how deeply the murder of their mother has affected him. He explains that Sung Tae still suffers from nightmares of that night, and that's why he can't leave Sung Tae alone. He promises her that he'll always keep both of them by his side. Moon Young understands and agrees. The following day, Moon Young visits Sang Tae, who is now working at Jae-soo's restaurant. She shows him a picture he drew of 3 people going on an adventure in an RV and asks him how he could forget his dream. She offers him the chance to become an art illustrator again. However, Sang-tae is still upset with Moon-young for lying to him, and he remains distant. Moon-young then, in her usual bold and determined way, shows Sang-tae the agreement paper he had signed, reminding him that if he breaks the agreement, he will have to pay 3 times the fine. Despite her efforts, Sang-tae still refuses. Determined, Moon-young orders a lot of pizza and invites Sang-tae to join her, but he angrily calls her a liar and runs away. Later, Moon-young shares this with Gang-tae, explaining how hard she tried to convince Sang-tae, but he wouldn't listen. Gang-tae teasingly tells her that she must have been forceful, suggesting that she should try talking to him with kindness instead. He adds that if she truly wants their relationship to continue, she has to make the effort. Gang-tae also tries to persuade Sang-tae to become Moon-young's illustrator, but Sang-tae is still unwilling. Frustrated, Gang-tae snaps, asking when Sang-tae will grow up and stop acting like a child. This angers Sang-tae, and the 2 brothers get into a fight. However, unlike previous arguments, Gang-tae finds himself enjoying the playful brawl. Both of them end up bruised and battered, but the lingering resentment they had toward each other begins to fade. That night, as Sang-tae sleeps, Gang-tae applies medicine to his wounds. Exhausted, Gang-tae falls asleep beside him, with a peaceful expression on his face. Sang-tae wakes up, and seeing his brother so happy for the first time in his life, he feels overjoyed. He hugs Gang-tae, and they fall asleep together. Their bond becomes stronger than ever. The next morning, as Gang-tae heads to work, Sang-tae calls him and suggests they go out for lunch together. Gang-tae, pleasantly surprised, agrees. Over lunch, Sang-tae shows maturity, serving food to Gang-tae and even paying the bill, declaring that from now on, he will act like a responsible older brother. Gang-tae is deeply touched and overjoyed by this change in Sang-tae. As they leave the restaurant, they run into Moon-young, who teasingly asks Sang-tae to pay for her meal too. Sang-tae refuses and walks away, leaving Gang-tae to cover her bill. As they step outside, Moon-young calls after Sang-tae saying, "I need a big brother too." This touches Sang-tae's heart, and he invites both Gang-tae and Moon-young to join him, strengthening their friendship once again. The next day, Gang-tae goes to Jae-soo's restaurant to enjoy some pizza. However, due to his handsomeness, a group of girls nearby starts flirting with him. Jae-soo captures the scene and sends a picture to Moon-young, who, upon seeing it, becomes furious and rushes to the restaurant. She arrives and scares off the other girls, while Gang-tae tries to calm her down. At the restaurant, Gang-tae sees some children playing and smiles, commenting on how pure and innocent children are. Moon-young mischievously responds, "Do you want to have kids with me too?" Gang-tae blushes and awkwardly changes the subject. Later, while grocery shopping, Moon-young continues teasing Gang-tae, loudly declaring that she wants to be the mother of his children, causing everyone around them to laugh. Gang-tae, embarrassed, tries his best to keep her quiet. After returning home, Moon-young, playful as always, sneaks up behind Gang-tae and hugs him tightly. She warns him that if he doesn't sleep in her room tonight, she won't let him go. Gang-tae, though hesitant, finally agrees. Later, as night falls, Moon-young, fully prepared and lying on her bed, waits for Gang-tae. However, Gang-tae tells her to sit on a chair, insisting he won't sleep beside her in bed. Moon-young offers him a drink, but Gang-tae declines, saying if they both drink, things might get out of hand. Moon-young drinks alone and eventually gets tipsy and loses her balance. Gang-tae catches her, but as Moon-young becomes more intoxicated, she begins to open up about her feelings. Gang-tae then asks her about how she feels about her mother. Moon-young, in her drunken state, admits that while her mother was a terrible person, she was still her mother. Hearing this, Gang-tae falls silent, reflecting on her words. The next day, Sang-tae is traveling with Pyeong on a bus. When the bus stops for a bit, Pyeong hears the loud noises from a nearby construction site, which trigger traumatic memories of war. Pyeong, a war veteran, is reminded of bombs and gunfire and begins to panic, screaming uncontrollably. Sang-tae quickly covers him with his jacket, trying to comfort and calm him down. He then takes Pyeong to the hospital, where director Oh Ji-won praises Sang-tae for saving the patient. Sang-tae gifts the director a copy of Moon-young's book, explaining how it gave him emotional strength. Seeing how Sang-tae's mental health has improved, director Oh Ji-won calls him into his office, with Gang-tae present as well. Director gently urges Sang-tae to try to recall what really happened the night their mother was murdered. Slowly, Sang-tae's memories begin to surface. He remembers walking in the forest with his mother when he got distracted by a cat and wandered away. When he returned, he saw his mother lying on the ground, covered in blood, with her throat slit. The killer was a woman wearing a coat with a distinctive butterfly badge, a pair of butterflies, one large and one small. Sang Tae recalls the killer grabbing his hair and warning him to forget what he saw, or she would kill him too. This moment left a deep trauma in Sang Tae's mind, scarring him for years. Sang Tae and Gong Tae reported this to the police decades ago, but they were unable to find the killer, and the case was eventually closed without resolution. However, when Gang Tae hears the description of the butterfly badge, he is shocked. He rushes to look at a family photo of Moon Young and notices the same butterfly badge on her mother's coat. This realization shatters him emotionally as it dawns on him that the woman who murdered his mother was none other than Moon Young's mother. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Gang Tae punches the door in frustration, injuring his hand in the process as he struggles to cope with the truth. When Moon Young visits Gang Tae and sees his injured hand, she becomes worried and asks him how it happened. Gang Tae, clearly distressed, tells her he's not in the mood to talk. Despite her persistent questioning, he eventually snaps and yells, "Just leave me alone! I don't want to talk right now." Later, Gang Tae breaks down in front of director Oh Ji-wong, asking him what he should do. He's stuck in an impossible situation. His mother's killer is actually the mother of the woman he loves. He feels trapped because taking revenge would only hurt Moon Young. The director advises him to stay strong, but even he knows there's little that can be done now. Gang Tae, overwhelmed, looks at a picture of his mother and cries, wondering how he can ever get justice for her. He locks himself in his room, avoiding both Sang Tae and Moon Young. A few days later, the date for the group photo arrives, something Sang Tae and Moon Young had planned in advance. Moon Young tries to convince Gang Tae to join them, but he doesn't respond. They wait for him for a long time, and when it seems like he won't come, they go ahead without him. As the photo session begins, Gang Tae unexpectedly shows up, wearing a suit. Moon Young is delighted to see his new look, and the three of them take their pictures together. Shortly after, Moon Young's father, Dae Hwan, passes away, leaving her devastated. She recalls her childhood when he used to read her stories, but everything changed after a fight between her parents. Days later, the three return to the hospital, and Sang Tae becomes distressed when he sees his painting. Someone drew a butterfly on his painting. The butterfly in it is the same one that was on the coat of his mother's killer. When Moon Young sees the butterfly, she's shocked, realizing her mother used to wear the same butterfly badge. This realization hits her hard, and she breaks down in tears, finally understanding that her mother is still alive and coming to kill her. Panicked, she runs out of the hospital, with Gang Tae trying to calm her, but emotionally, she's already shattered. Later, director Oh Ji-wong shows Gang Tae a CCTV image, revealing that the butterfly badge was made by the hospital's head nurse, Park Hyung-ja. Now it's clear to both Gang Tae and the director that Moon Young's mother is actually Park Hyung-ja. She was the one who killed Dae Hwan by cutting his lifeline in the hospital. Before he died, she told him she had kept him in the hospital for 20 years just to slowly torture him. Now, Park Hyung-ja is planning to kill Moon Young as well. Moon Young, desperate for answers, asks Gang Tae to tell her the truth. Though hesitant, Gang Tae finally admits that it was Park Hyung-ja who killed his and Sang Tae's mother. Hearing this, Moon Young is devastated, crying uncontrollably, and questioning why her mother would do such a thing. She repeatedly apologizes to Gang Tae, but he hugs her and reassures her that none of this is her fault. It was her mother's crime, not hers. However, Moon Young, burdened by guilt, tells Gang Tae that she can't live with him and Sang Tae anymore. Every time she looks at them, she'll be reminded of how much her mother hurt them. She urges him to take Sang Tae and leave. Gang Tae refuses, promising that he will always stay with her and never leave her side. But despite his reassurances, Moon Young insists that they go. After some time, Sang Tae brings food to Moon Young's room, as she hasn't eaten in days. He gently feeds her, spoonful by spoonful, while she eats through her tears, repeatedly apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Sang Tae doesn't understand why she's apologizing. Later, he tells Gang Tae that Moon Young has been asking for forgiveness, though he doesn't know why. Hearing this, Gang Tae, emotional, hugs Sang Tae and praises him for feeding her, but he keeps the real reason for her apologies to himself. The next day, Park Hyung-ja calls Gang Tae and asks to meet him alone. He decides it's time to finally confront his mother's killer. When they meet, his anger flares up, but he tries to control it. She has already given Sang Tae a sedative to make sure he stays asleep and won't interfere. Hyung-ja asks if he has read the letter Park Ok-ran left on the table. Gang Tae confirms he read it and dismissed it as nonsense. Park Hyung-ja then reveals that according to the deal in the letter, he must leave Moon Young and disappear, or she will kill everyone. Gang Tae refuses, saying he will never leave Moon Young alone with someone as cruel as her. When he asks why she wants Moon Young alone, Park Hyung-ja coldly explains that Moon Young is her creation, and she won't let anyone ruin her masterpiece. Shocked by this, Gong Tae accuses her of treating her daughter like a mere object, consumed by her selfishness. At that moment, Park Hoon-ja recalls the day she killed Gong Tae's mother. Triggered by the sight of a pen, she remembers how Gong Tae's mother had worked as a maid in her house and once saw Moon Young killing butterflies. Concerned, she had suggested that Moon Young needed psychological help and even offered to admit her to a hospital, the same one where Sang-tae was being treated. This infuriated Hong-ja, who felt insulted and immediately fired her. Later, in a fit of rage, she used that same pen to kill Gang Tae's mother by slitting her throat in the forest. As Gang Tae hears this, tears stream down his face as he cries out that she killed his mother over something so trivial. She laughs at his anguish, provoking him further. Consumed by rage, Gang Tae lunges at her, trying to strangle her. Instead of fighting back, she provokes him further, daring him to kill her as it will destroy his relationship with Moon Young forever. Thinking of Moon Young, he hesitates and pulls back. Seizing the opportunity, Hong-ja injects him with a sedative, causing him to lose consciousness. Moon Young arrives immediately, and seeing Gang Tae's condition, panics. She grabs the pen and, in a desperate move, tries to stab her mother. Just before she strikes, Gang Tae, despite his weakened state, steps in and takes the blow, injuring his hand. Moon Young breaks down in tears, asking him why he stopped her. Meanwhile, Park Hong-ja tries to seize the opportunity to attack Moon Young with the pen, but Sang-tae swiftly intervenes, grabbing a heavy book and hitting Park Hong-ja on the head, knocking her unconscious. The police arrive and arrest Park Hong-ja, taking her away. Director Oh Ji-wong tells her that her game is over and she'll spend the rest of her life in prison. Park Hong-ja, however, smiles and says that her purpose for coming here has been fulfilled, and Moon Young and Gang Tae will never be able to be together. Days pass, and Moon Young doesn't speak to Gang Tae. Deep down, she feels responsible for the murder of Gang Tae's mother. She hasn't eaten in days. Since Gang Tae can't meet her directly, he contacts Juri for help, asking her to bring Moon Young to her home to comfort her, because she is deeply depressed. Juri calls Moon Young and asks if she can visit her mother, Soon Daeok, who is ill and wants to see her. Initially, Moon Young refuses, but she later agrees to visit. When Moon Young arrives, she finds that Soon Daeok is perfectly fine and wonders why she was called. Soon Daeok explains that her only purpose was to cheer her up and has prepared a special meal for her. After some insistence, Moon Young begins to eat. Soon Daeok advises her to forget what happened and move on, not to punish herself for her mother's sins. When Moon Young returns home, she finds Sang-tae waiting for her. Sang-tae, who previously struggled with drawing emotions, tells her that he has learned how to draw emotions perfectly. He shows her a drawing of Gang Tae's smiling face, which brings tears of joy to Moon Young's eyes. At the hospital, Gang Tae plants a tree in his mother's name and hangs a group photo of himself, Sang-tae, and Moon Young. Moon Young approaches the tree and apologizes to Gang Tae's mother, feeling responsible for everything. Gang Tae arrives and tells her that she is not to blame and shouldn't mourn. Despite his reassurance, Moon Young leaves without responding. Gang Tae follows her, repeating, "I love you," just as Moon Young did at the beginning. He continues to say, "I love you," while Moon Young walks away without replying. Eventually, they both arrive home, and Gang Tae, with sincerity in his eyes, says, "I love you," from the depths of his heart and gently kisses her. Now, Moon Young feels happy and agrees to stay with Gang Tae. He tells her that they should leave the past behind and start fresh. Days pass, and Moon Young begins writing a new book again, this time with Sang-tae's help. Gang Tae tries to read the story, but Moon Young, wanting to keep the suspense, playfully kicks him out. After months of hard work, the storybook is finally completed, and Sang-yin publishes it through his company. Sang-tae, overwhelmed with emotion, takes the book to their mother's plant and reads it aloud while crying, telling his mother, "I've become a professional artist, Mom." Gang Tae is also moved to tears and hugs him. The book is about three friends whose real faces are stolen by a witch. They embark on an adventurous journey to recover their true faces. After facing many challenges, they finally defeat the witch and retrieve their real identities. However, in the end, they realize it wasn't their faces but their happiness that the witch had taken, and they succeed in reclaiming it. At the publication ceremony, Moon Young and Sang-tae get so excited to present their book that they start playfully arguing over who gets to tell the story. Their little squabble makes everyone laugh. The dark shadows from their lives have finally lifted, and happiness fills their hearts. Sang-tae also completes the mural at the hospital, and director Oh Ji-wong gives him an RV as a reward. When Gang Tae asks why such a big gift, director explains that for 20 years he failed to see Park Hong-ja's true nature, even though she worked under him. The RV is a reward for both brothers' patience and resilience. With the RV, Moon Young, Gang Tae, and Sang-tae set off on a long adventure. They enjoy the journey together, embracing the joy that has returned to their lives. As things settle down, Sang-tae senses that Moon-young and Gang-tae might need some privacy. He shares that he's been offered a job as an art director by another writer and would like to accept the opportunity. Gang-tae, with tears in his eyes, hugs Sang-tae and tells him to take care of himself. Just then, Sang-in arrives to pick him up. And with that, the beautiful journey comes to an end.